The date is October 23rd in the year 2024. My name is Anita Hecht, and I have the great pleasure and honor of interviewing Chief James Hawkins to record the stories of your life here in Garden City and your work on behalf of the Finnip Foundation and the Garden City Oral History Project. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview.
You're welcome.
Well, once again, thank you for doing this with me and for us. It's, I think, an important archive of firsthand stories that contributes to the history of this place.
Okay.
So, to begin with, tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Monroe, Wisconsin, in 1950, and lived in Wisconsin till I was maybe 6, and then moved to Boulder, Colorado. Grew up in Boulder, Colorado, went through elementary school, high school, and university in Boulder. And then I moved away. Went to school at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts, and then moved back west. Got a teaching job in Steamboat Springs, Colorado for a year, and then moved to Garden City in 1979.
Garden City, 1979. Tell me a little bit about your family of origin, your mother and your father's sides, and how they influenced you.
Well, influence-wise, they were incredibly hard workers. My mother worked her entire life that I knew. My father did.
What kind of work did they do?
Well, my father was an auto mechanic, a firefighter in Boulder, Colorado, and then ultimately they bought a small ranch in Wyoming and played out the rest of their life up there. But they were hard workers. They encouraged education, told us all we should go to school, and encouraged university. Very, very moral, but not judgmental type people. And very, very accepting mostly of everybody.
What was the immigration or ethnicity story of either side?
My mother was Swiss. Her parents came to the U.S. in the teens, the 19 teens, and her mother died when my mother was like 7 years old, but she had 3 siblings. They all had to learn English when they went to school because they spoke Swiss at home.
Swiss German?
Yep. And
did you grow up hearing that?
I did.
Language?
Well, I did for about 6 years, and then once we moved to Boulder, no.
Okay.
My grandfather, my mother's mother, died when I was about 4. So I remember conversing with him in German, Swiss. But then after that, I had a kind of an uncle, and he spoke Swiss German, and his terms of endearment were in Swiss, and so we heard that. But then once we moved to Colorado, I kind of lost most of that. And my father was English, Irish, Dutch type mixture. So, but they both grew up in southern Wisconsin. My father went off to World War II, came back, they got married. About 3 years later, they had a child, my sister, and then they had me. and ultimately a younger brother who was born in Colorado.
Uh-huh. And what did your father do for work?
He was in Wisconsin. He farmed, and then he moved to town and was an auto mechanic. Then he was a firefighter in Boulder, Colorado. And then he went back to auto mechanics. And then they moved to Wyoming in the late 60s.
Right.
And he farmed and auto mechanicked
Okay.
still.
So you were born in 50 and through your schooling in Boulder. I thought it was interesting. Talk a little bit about languages. You mentioned Swiss German, but then
Right.
something else happened.
When I was in, I think, third grade, probably more like it, there was a pilot program in the Boulder Valley School District for Spanish. And about twice a week, a Spanish instructor would come into our third grade class and teach us the basics of Spanish. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And continued on through junior high school, had the opportunity to go to school in Mexico in a city called Toluca, and went to the university there for a summer. And then I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder and ultimately majored in Spanish. So,
In 1973, you got your BA in Spanish.
yes.
And you studied also in Europe. Is that right?
Yes, I did. Studied at the University of Lisbon in Portugal.
So you also speak Portuguese.
I do,
Yeah.
yes.
It was an interesting time to grow up. You must have graduated from high school in what, 1969?
68.
68?
It was the, yeah, it was pretty interesting because that was kind of the beginning of this strange social movement. You know, they were called hippies, but who knows what they really should have been called. But I mean, it was a very anti-war society at the time. Kind of the temperature was pretty warm. Lots of demonstrations. Of course, it was a university town.
Did it influence you in certain ways?
Yeah, I think so. And surprisingly, my father was against the Vietnamese War or the Vietnam War, even though he had been a World War II vet. He felt like we shouldn't be there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I think it probably helped shape my outlook on life.
So you went through graduate school, you started teaching,
Uh-huh.
and bring me to Garden City. What happened?
I was teaching at a private prep school in Steamboat Springs. Very high dollar tuition at the time. There were kids whose parents owned gigantic drug companies in the United States. So that was the kind of student population we had. But it was a very mountainous school. We skied in the afternoons. We went hiking. We, did mountain things. And I was teaching Spanish. In the spring, it was their tradition to go to Europe for 2 months because in the end of March, everything starts thawing and becomes a mud hole in Steamboat Springs. So we went to Italy for 6 weeks. And then I took a group of students to Spain for a week, came back, started looking for different jobs. And
Because you were
um,
burnt out?
I
or-
was not enamored of the rich kid
Right.
atmosphere. And so I saw this job advertised in Garden City, Kansas for an ESL instructor. And
In the newspaper? I mean, this is
Um,
before the days of the internet job searches.
yeah, this was before that, but I received I subscribed to a little job bulletin through the University of Colorado. Saw it, made arrangements, came down, interviewed, and took the job.
Had you ever been to Kansas, much less Garden City?
Just through it. I'd been
Okay.
through Kansas, and came to interview and looked around at the town, and it was quaint and small. But the idea was to stay about 3 years and then go somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
And here you still are.
Here I am.
We'll talk more about
Yeah,
why.
we will, yes. But that was the plan, was to get about 3 years of experience and then see if I could move somewhere else and teach. Didn't work out that way.
Well, how did it work out? Tell me a little bit about the teaching, which you
Yeah.
did for how many years? You did
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Where did you teach? Who did you teach? What was the environment that you encountered?
Ostensibly, I was to teach English as a second language to recent arrivals. And it started out that way. In fact, my first year, I had a kid from India. I had a kid from several kids from Vietnam. Of course, several from Mexico. So it was a true ESL class. But as politics seems to intervene sometimes, we didn't have big numbers. And of course, the school district wanted to show that they were doing their due diligence and earning the money that the federal government was giving them for ESL classes. And so I ended up getting kids that actually whose native language was English, but their surnames were Hispanic. So that kind of turned me off a little bit.
Because you were doing different kinds of.
Well, I was teaching kids who didn't get along very well in their normal English classes. They were kind of behavioral problems, and they got farmed out to me. And
I see.
so I started looking for different jobs.
I see. In terms of those kids that you first encountered, what brought them here? What kinds of difficulties were they having?
Well,
They were behavioral.
in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a refugee program for Vietnamese refugees, and so the Vietnamese kids and the Lao kids and the Cambodian kids, they were brought here, some through Catholic relief services and some through other churches, but they were brought here and needed to learn English and go
So
through
they were
school.
refugees from war.
Yes.
And then the Hispanics were more economic
Yeah, they were
immigrants.
immigrants. They were looking for jobs and mostly for employment. Yeah. So they brought their children, and their children went to school.
That was before there was a huge influx of immigrants, correct? Which became
Well,
a greater wave.
it was kind of a steady. It was kind of steady at the time,
Okay.
and I taught at the junior high, middle school level. But I had kids who did quite well in school. I mean, they came, and if they stayed the whole year, um, they did pretty well and learned English quickly because, of course, they were teenagers and wanted to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then after that, there was another wave of immigrants, but that was after I left
Okay.
the school district.
Okay. Did you experience Garden City as a pretty welcoming place at that point to immigrants, or did they seem to have a hard time fitting in? Did you have a sense of that?
I kind of got a mixed message from from Garden City, that they what brought them here in the first place was the beef packing plant out west of town. Um, and many of the old timers, I'll call them old timers, they they were opposed to this massive beef packing plant because they didn't want the immigrants. But it was good for the economy, so it was kind of a mixed message going on there. And they had kind of got burned out on just the construction phase of IBP, which was the beef packing plant. And I think they were a little grumpy about it
Mm-hmm.
because there was no housing for them. And it created housing shortages. It created, issues with the school district too. I mean, they had to send them to school and make arrangements for them, like ESL classes, which they hadn't had before. So it was taxing, and some people, I think, kind of begrudged it a little bit.
How was it for you? I know you decided you didn't want to do the
Yeah.
teaching after 4 years, but just to live in a place that had that much diversity.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah. Well, you like languages and
Yeah, I
other
liked
cultures.
languages. I liked different cultures. I'd gone to school in Mexico. I'd gone to school in Portugal. I'd traveled in South America and just loved traveling. And I had traveled in Europe before going to school there. So I liked that mix of stuff and the different foods and the different attitudes of people. So for me, I liked it.
Yeah.
I was having a
Probably
good time.
one of the reasons you saw yourself able to stay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
With some of the behavior problems you saw, what were they? If you had the Hispanic kids in your classes, was there any gang stuff back then, or
There
drug?
wasn't gang stuff back then. There were just misbehaving students. I mean, they were they just had attitudes, and they didn't they got kind of sassy,
Okay.
and some of the kids that I had were incredibly smart, but they just had an attitude, and the teachers, their normal teachers, didn't want to put up with it, and so I got them.
So you got them.
Yeah.
And then after a while, you thought, I think I want to do something else. And what was that something else?
Well, I started looking for other teaching jobs throughout the country and discovered I had probably maybe I was getting paid too much to do that, to start over, because I had a master's
I
degree.
see.
I had experience. And invariably, I found jobs, but they hired people right out of college because they were cheaper to hire. So I started, I had kind of a part-time job at the college as an ESL instructor for adults at the Adult Learning Center. And I really liked that. And I actually tried to, I applied for the directorship of that program. Um, I was told it was more of a woman's job, and and didn't get the job. So I started looking locally for jobs and saw a job advertised for police officer, and said maybe I could do that.
Had you ever thought of doing that before?
Oh, for a long time, but
Oh, really?
yeah. But everybody said, well, you're too well educated to be a police officer. And I went, maybe we need more
Right.
educated police officers. So I applied for that and got hired as a police officer. I was 33 years old when I started. So I was kind of an old rookie.
Anything you want to say about either the application or the training process?
Well, the application process was something I'd never experienced. I had to take a polygraph exam. I had to take a psychological exam. So, it was a pretty intensive vetting process. And then I had to go away for 2 months to the academy in Hutchinson, Kansas, or outside of Hutchinson, Kansas. But no, it was basic police stuff and learning the law. And
Is that process pretty much the same today in terms of applying and
yeah,
training?
it is.
Okay.
And they still take polygraphs. They still take psychological exams and written exams, and all of that has changed over the years. But basically, the process is they're looking for decent people, you know.
How big was the department when you joined?
I think we had like 40, between 35 and 40 officers, and then a support staff of maybe 20, 25.
Is that comparable to today, or has it grown larger?
It has grown. When I retired, we had 60 officers and 30 some support staff.
Probably paralleling the population growth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So tell me about sort of your early years, your first patrols. What particular stories stand out to you?
I remember stopping a person that I knew while I was in training. We stopped this person for DUI, actually, and ended up arresting her. And I felt really bad for her. But at the same time, I thought, you shouldn't have been driving under the influence. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me, that normal people that you know on a daily basis do dumb things. You know?
And that your position maybe carried some weight that was...
Yeah. And of course, when this person recognized me, they said, oh, you can't arrest me, you know me and all this. And I said, yeah, we have to, because. So, and then I also ran into former students that I had. So their behavior hadn't changed much, but some of them were good kids, and they remembered me, but also realized that they were breaking the law, and had to pay for that.
Mhm.
So it was different.
It was a new role.
It was. It was. Yeah.
Talk about the makeup of the force at the time. Who were police officers in those days?
It was mostly white male. I did have a Hispanic supervisor, and he was a rarity, really. And there were on and off women who hired on, but didn't stay. And I noticed that pattern, and I thought, this can't be good. But we would have a woman officer, and then she would resign or go somewhere else. Then we'd hire one more. And then once we had two, and I thought, well, this is great, you know. But it took a long time to build up a female contingent of officers, you know.
What accounts for that? Do you think it was the environment that they didn't feel comfortable in?
I think it was
just
kind of
wasn't?
a culture. It was a macho culture. And it still is kind of, but at the same time, the department has probably more women than ever now, which is great. I think that you have to have that mix. And there's Caucasians, there's Hispanics, there's and that was the other thing when I first started, we had no African American officers at all. And then we hired one, and then he would leave. Then we'd hire another one, she would leave. It took a long time to build that base up.
We'll get to the time when you become chief, and I assume that was one of your goals to diversify the force
Right.
to reflect the
Right.
population.
Right.
When you started, how was Garden City changing? Started in 1983. So I imagine the city was also going through a lot of change at that time.
Yeah, it was. We had a larger Asian population than we do now. I think mostly because of the relief services of the different churches, and like many immigrants, once you have a small enclave, the word gets out and they come. And they would attract friends or relatives from California or something. There was a huge refugee camp in California, and they would once they left Vietnam, went to the Philippines, and then where they went in between there, and then got to California. Well, then if they could get a sponsor to bring them, they would go to different communities, and Garden City seemed to have a lot of sponsorship, you know, so that was good.
When in those early years on the force, did you have the sense that the police treated the locals and the immigrants differently or equally?
Oh yeah. I mean, we actually had, you know, Vietnam War vets who did not appreciate the fact that we were now letting Vietnamese come to our community, which I thought, hey, you know, we invaded their country, not vice versa. So, you know, on one hand, I understood that, but on the other hand, I thought, you know, you got to get over it. It's sure you were in a bad situation, but it wasn't their fault.
So there were some war vets on the force? Interesting.
Yeah.
And so they had a different attitude.
They had a different perspective on it. Yeah. I thought it was cool. I thought, you know, I just really appreciate different cultures.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an eye opener too. That well, geez, I appreciate the fact that you went through this war, but at the same time, it wasn't their fault.
Right.
you know.
Interesting. Yeah. Take me through your path through the ranks, like from position to position. How did you move through?
So, of course, I started as a patrol officer. I was an officer on the street for about 2 years and had the opportunity to work undercover narcotics, and I took that and did that for 6, 8 months, I think. And then there was an opening in the investigations division, which is what I really wanted to do, was be a detective.
Because
It's cool.
it's cool. You had an uncle who was also.
I did. I had an uncle who was a detective in Boulder, Colorado, and this was back in the 50s. He wore a fedora and a suit and tie, and just
Yeah.
it was
It was
detective.
cool.
It was detective novel stuff.
Right.
It really was. So, but the fact that you get to take a case and go all the way through,
Right.
and interview people and get them to either tell you the truth or lie to you or whatever, just tell you stories. That was the fun part. And completing a case was big for me. I like that part of it.
Yeah.
Because on patrol, you stop somebody, you write them a ticket. Sometimes you arrest them, and then you don't see them again, unless they go to court or something like that. But you get to see the big story,
Can
the
you
big
give us
picture.
an example of a story that you worked on or an investigation as a detective that just was a Garden City story?
Well, it's really a tragic one. A mother took her son, her 4-year-old, to the hospital, and he had died at home. And once we started digging into this case, we found out she had already murdered 6 other kids. 5 of them were hers, and one was a cousin.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was horrible. But I mean, that took, I think that was like 5-month investigation.
Did she have some mental illness?
Well, I guess I'm not a doctor, but I think, yeah, she probably had some kind of desire for attention. They call it Munchausen syndrome by proxy, because you get the attention, somebody else pays for it, but you get the attention. And that was an amazing case, because her family was all, and her name was Diana Lumbrera, and she's still in prison in Texas, where she murdered 5 of the kids, six of the kids, I think. But her family would say, well, poor Diana, her children are dying. Well, yeah, she's killing them. But they didn't see that. They said, well, her former mother-in-law put a spell on her, which I thought was really interesting, because there was a little curanderismo in there. It was
Sort of witchcraft.
witchcraft. Yeah,
Mexican?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And she claimed that her former mother-in-law had put a spell on her and caused her to do all this stuff. And course, we didn't buy that,
Right.
but the family did.
Mm.
You know, and when I interviewed the lady, she would tell me about the the owls in her backyard and the deer walking through her backyard, and they were all, you know, black magic symbols
Mhm.
and bad omens and things like that. And I found it really interesting, tragic, but
Right.
interesting.
Probably didn't do much to help the views of locals towards
Yeah,
Hispanics if they weren't already
yeah.
open to them.
It was a pretty. The trial was pretty well covered in the paper,
Mhm.
and but we couldn't bring in any of that, all that witchcraft
Huh.
stuff.
I imagine you used your Spanish quite a bit
I
on the
did.
job,
Yeah,
so that was helpful to
it
you.
was. Yeah. Um,
What year was that? Do you remember? Just sort
that
of to put
was
us in context.
1980. I want to say 88,
So late
something like
80s. Okay.
87, 88.
And that's when you were a detective.
Yes. Okay, so then after that, I became a lieutenant in what we call the Office of Professional Standards, or in simpler terms, internal affairs. You know, uh,
How did that
which
change your role?
it I was in charge of recruiting, hiring,
Okay.
testing, and then sometimes investigating misbehavior on employees, which was an eye opener too.
Oh, tell me a story there.
Oh,
So you're talking about internal kind of issues within the force.
right. If let's say someone is accused of discrimination by a citizen, well, that would be my job to investigate it and determine whether or not it was true or
Hmm.
not true. If
And is there a story there? Did you find discrimination or did you?
Not so much, but people do dumb things, even even police officers and other police employees, and yeah, they do dumb things, and sometimes they're disciplined, sometimes they're fired,
Mhm.
sometimes they're suspended or whatever. And we were really good at policing ourselves. I always thought,
Yeah.
we if you messed up, you paid for it. And if you didn't, you know, if you were accused falsely, you were told, hey, you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And I really can't think of anything that would be appropriate to talk about.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
So,
But did you have the general sense that it was a pretty upstanding department and that you didn't have
absolutely,
to deal with
yeah,
corruption or lack of ethics or?
right. Well, we had like a cookbook manual of how to do things. And if you were accused of something, well, you could go through that manual and see, you know, did you do this properly? Did you
Mhm.
do this? Or
Mhm.
did you mess up here or whatever? So I thought we always did a really good job of policing our own and
Mhm.
fixing problems if there were problems.
Did you have out in the community a lot of crime at that time in the
Mm,
late 80s, 90s? What were you dealing with?
well, we probably averaged 4 to 5 homicides a year. There were, it was the beginning of drugs. Uh, Not the beginning, but there were, it was the continuation of drugs. And we had a lot of drugs coming in from probably Mexico, probably California, and we kind of had the start of a mini drug cartel in Garden City, and it was always the same people we were investigating for drugs or watching drugs. So there was that.
What kind of drugs were being trafficked at the time?
It was cocaine and marijuana and very rarely heroin. It was the pre-methamphetamine. Well, that's not true, because when I was in a patrol officer, we had bikers who were into methamphetamine, but not to the degree that it became in the 2000s and that horrible epidemic of methamphetamine.
Which you experienced too, I imagine, somewhat here.
Right. So then after doing that, I was promoted to captain, and actually still maintained that same responsibility of internal affairs, just on a higher level. And I had people who could do the work for me, some of it, and some of it I still had to do. But
so captain meant you had more staff, and what were your responsibilities in addition to internal affairs?
I was part of the decision-making group of officers, more so than lieutenant. So I was actually in charge of the whole internal affair thing, and the testing and the promoting. Anytime we had an opening for something, we would have a promotional process, and I was in charge of that for 4 years. And then I became chief, and it went downhill after that. But,
So you become chief in 96.
Correct.
So from 92 to 96, you're captain.
correct.
Talk a little bit about how much of being captain, and we'll talk about this as chief too, allowed you to do your own goal setting for what you wanted to see happen in the department, like whether it was diversifying the force or getting.
Yeah, I still had to answer to the chief.
And who was your chief when you were?
His name was Roger Schrader.
Okay. And was that a good relationship? Did you feel?
Yeah,
that
we
you-
had a good relationship, and he was a quiet individual, and I mean, but at the same time, he would tell you what he wanted, and then, but you could talk to him and say, hey, I think maybe this would be a better path. But that also got me out into the community as a captain, because it was we would sometimes take on the role of the chief. If he went on vacation, one of us had to be in charge, and it was a rotating responsibility.
How many captains were there?
There were 3.
3. Okay. So you got to sort of see different leadership styles and different priorities that
Correct.
your chief set. What were your thoughts at that point about what you thought was needed in Garden City?
Well, I was still maintaining that we needed a more diverse workforce, and at one point, it was exciting to me. We had 6 female officers out of 60, so that's only 10%, but it was a start.
Yeah.
But and at one point we had 2 Vietnamese officers, which was just incredible. But they both moved away to bigger cities because the opportunities for them were there, and the Vietnamese population in Garden City was dwindling, and they weren't comfortable in the small environment that they found themselves, so they moved away.
Talk a little bit, sort of throughout, I think it's an interesting topic you told me about earlier when we spoke about gaining the trust of the different communities you served.
Yeah, when I was in investigations as a detective, we had a robbery at a Vietnamese store. And we caught the bad guys, which really, they were Vietnamese.
They were also Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but.
So there was some fighting or conflict within these communities.
They mostly victimized each other. I mean, unfortunately, even in the beginning when the Vietnamese were still coming here, there were home invasions perpetrated by other Vietnamese because they knew that their fellow Vietnamese kept cash in the house, or they gambled. They liked to gamble, and they had lots of money in the house, and so sometimes they would do that, victimize each other. But and they didn't want to cooperate when those things happened because, for one, they came from a country where the police weren't trusted at all, which was hard to get across to other officers. I said, well, think about where these people come from. Think about what type of government they come from. They don't trust that government. Why would they trust this one,
Probably same in Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, the police are notorious for being corrupt.
And I was offered bribes on the street here by Mexicans, and I didn't take it personally because when I did live in Mexico, I did bribe one of the police officers. It's how it works. But the other officers would just go crazy if somebody offered them money and they wanted to arrest him immediately. I said, wait. It's how it works where they come from. Yeah. Just say no, thank you, and do your job. And, it's a learning experience for everybody. Mm-hmm. So
how did you gain the trust of like the Vietnamese?
Yeah, I think that was a turning point when we caught those robbers within 10 minutes. We had a description of the vehicle and caught them, and that kind of opened their eyes to the fact that, oh yeah, they do work for us too. We're not.
The police are on our side.
Yeah.
If we need help.
Right.
Did you also do outreach? Was there any kind of...
We did. We, especially after I became chief, we would go to just different neighborhoods and have a little meet and greet and get to know people and say, we're here for you too.
Any other stories about captaining before we move to chiefdom?
Let's see. No, not really. I mean, it was a good job.
Well, I was also curious about some of the kinds of crimes you saw and if they differed among the different groups. Was there more domestic violence? Was there more, were you dealing with white collar crime at all? Or is there in different?
Oh, we had some white collar, but in different communities, in the like say in the Vietnamese community, there were um, sometimes there was extortion um, from other Vietnamese, or there were kind of insurance scam sort of things that you don't find in other communities. Um, Domestic violence, not so much that, um, but we had domestic violence from everybody. I mean,
Across the board.
across the board.
Mhm.
And talk about something that's changed over the years is when I first started and we had a domestic violence situation, there was not necessarily an arrest. It was like, why don't you go and stay at your mother's house until things cool off? And I didn't agree with that, but I mean that was how it worked. Fortunately, the state of Kansas said, "Hey, if there's evidence of violence, you will make an arrest," and that made it much easier for officers to do their job, I think. And I appreciated that because somebody should have gone to jail most of the time, and it wasn't always necessarily so. So,
So how did you become chief of police?
oh, well, the other chief resigned and moved to Missouri.
That
To
was
become a-
Roger Schrader.
Yeah,
Okay.
to become a chief
Okay.
in another community in Missouri. So I waffled back and forth, and I thought I may as well go for it, because I thought there were things that needed to be changed,
Such as?
or improved. Well, like recruitment for one, and just maybe mellow out the machismo stuff to where we treat people with a little more dignity than we are, and see if we can kind of gain more trust from the community. And at that point, we had a lot of another wave of immigrants, and we had a lot of issues with unlicensed drivers, uninsured drivers, and people who didn't want to report crimes because, for one, they were here unlawfully, and two, they didn't trust us. So that was one of the things that I thought we could do better.
So how do you do that? How do you reduce machismo? How do you
Well,
how do you deal with undocumented people who don't want to report because they're fearing for their own lives?
well, you go out into their community and you say, hey, this is why we're here. And we don't care if you're undocumented. We don't care if you don't have a license. We do care if you have a license. We'd rather you not drive, but the state of Kansas took that part away, because undocumented people could get licenses. But then they passed a law said if you're not a citizen, you can't have a license.
This is more recent.
Oh, this was 15 years ago by
okay.
now. So
that changed.
yeah, it changed. And that to me was a bad change. For one, now we don't know who they really are because
There's no documentation.
There's no documentation. But you do it by you go out and you get to know them and and you encourage your officers to go out and get to know them, and play basketball with the kids or do something besides run around in your squad car all day and with the windows up.
Yeah.
And we had like bicycle officers, and they were really popular and things like that.
So this is some of what you did when you became so becoming chief. Did you have to apply? Was this something you wanted to do, or was it kind of a given at the time of your career?
I think the process was pretty for in-house. It was pretty simple. I just wrote a memo to the city manager and said I'd like to be considered, and of course they opened it up to statewide, nationwide, and interviewed a bunch of people and picked me. I
You
guess
were the best choice.
I don't know if I was the best, but I was the choice. you know.
So what were some of the first things that you did speak a little bit about your goals,
Yeah.
diversifying and
Yeah.
also softening a bit
Yeah.
how did you do that?
Maybe by example.
Mhm.
And sometimes I would go riding with officers, they hated it. They hate it when the chief rides with them, because they can't be themselves. And I said, you can be yourself. Let's just go ride. And maybe just show by example that, hey, you don't have to be a hard ass all the time. And there's a time and place for that. Turn your switch on and off. You got an on-off switch. Use it. So, and was it perfect? No, nobody's perfect. And I mean, nobody succeeds 100% of the time, but by and large, it worked.
Were there new things that you instituted, certain trainings or?
Oh yeah. And I hate to use the term diversity training, but I would encourage people to, learn about the different cultures. Like I had a friend who was Somali, and he worked for he was a chemical engineer by training, but he became a social worker when he came to the U.S. So he worked for the social services here, and he would give us training, and then we'd bring in other people from other cultures that would say, "Hey, this is what we're about." And I would sometimes go in, and we have what we call roll call, and officers come in on a daily basis. Sometimes I would go in and give them tips on, why does an Hispanic driver run a red light at 3:00 in the morning? Because nobody's coming, it's just logical to do that, They can see that nobody's coming. Why did you write them a ticket at 3:00 in the morning when they were the only other car on the street?
Besides you.
Be practical about some things.
Use good judgment.
Yeah. And I said, they look at driving in kind of a pragmatic way. If nobody's coming, why do they have to sit there for 3 minutes while the light is red? That's silly. And they go, you're right.
And if the chief is saying it, it must be okay.
Yeah.
So you really got to set the tone.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
What do you do when you encounter sort of prejudice attitudes? How did you manage that, or did you get blowback at all for trying to diversify the force?
No. Um, the only concern was, I think, that we were lowering standards, and I said, no, we're not. We're actually raising the standards here by hiring people that reflect our community. I mean, that's what we want. We want the community to identify with us. And so we didn't get much blowback from that, I don't think.
Any other stories you want to tell me about being chief? I mean, there's lots of questions I have, but maybe talk about some of your successes, what you're proud of, and maybe some of the things that.
Oh, just I think my best effort was the diversification of the department, and community acceptance. And, I got invited to horrible banquets and things like that, but I went because, like, several times a year, this Hispanic group in town would have scholarship banquet, and I would go to those and mingle and get to know those folks. And we even offered a scholarship to the local college, just so we could attract different ethnicities for the department. So, and we did internships. We would get college kids that come in and just do internships.
So recruitment wasn't too much of a challenge. Did you get enough people who
we
wanted
did.
to?
We started. Once you get one or two, then the group, somebody who's interested will look around and go, "Huh, all right," But if you walk into a room and everybody's white and you're not,
Yeah.
you go, I don't know, maybe if I want to come here or not.
Right.
So,
And you feel that the trust really has been built. That's a great legacy to leave.
well, and I hope it's still there.
So you retired in 2015.
I did, yes.
Okay. Yes, go on. I interrupted you, but you hope it's still there since then.
I'm hoping it's still there. I guess. Without getting into too much detail, I think there was a period after I left that things kind of went south for a little while. I don't know.
Did that have to do with the bigger political picture of the country becoming less enamored with immigration, or
maybe, but it also and it's not just the immigrants sometimes who don't trust the community or the police department. It's the community in general. If they feel like there's favoritism here, or and I think there was a short period where that kind of
after you left, that well, it was maybe big shoes to fill.
I
Came after you.
I don't know.
Were there certain challenges that you didn't like about the job, about being chief? Was there a political aspect, or a funding aspect, or
city commissions are strange animals. We operate on a city commission government where we have 5 commissioners, and they review your budget requests every year, and they're reluctant to spend money and stuff like that, and that was a bigger challenge than anything was, um, and typically they're old white people, and um, and even I mean the city commission now is more reflective of a changing society than it ever has been. But for a while there was all these old white guys who were tight with their money, and you go, you know, you want services, you have to pay for them. Um, and they were more worried about whether an officer waved at them than they were about whether the officer's car was in good shape or not. You know, it's just like, come on. And so that was a challenge. I always, city governments and I get it, there's taxpayers involved, but if you're going to service the taxpayers, you got to have the resources and you have to pay for them.
So there was a political aspect to your job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any?
I wasn't the best at that. I mean, I never called anyone a name in a commission meeting, but you know, politely you say, you don't have a clue. You know.
Well, what do you think? I mean, if this is partly to leave a legacy of your lessons, what would you say the lessons are that you'd like to share with future government, future officers and chiefs of police? What do you think you'd like to pass on as, you know, the way that you found to be an effective leader of a...
Well, I think you have to be fair. And by fair, I'll give you an example. We have two sons, my wife and I. They both got arrested at one point in their careers as teenagers, you know. And
the sons of the chief of police arrested.
And they were treated exactly like we would treat anyone else. Yeah. And the officers who are still there that, you know, did that, they remember that. Because the youngest one, he got arrested one night, and I get a call from the sergeant, and he says, Chief, he says, we've arrested your son. What do you want us to do? And I said, well, what would you normally do? And he said, well, we would cite him, and we would call the parents, and the parents would come get him. And I said, when you're done filling out the citation, call me and I'll come get him. You know, and that went a long way. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
you know, it's, you have to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I learned was that when someone would call and say, hey, my son got arrested, can you keep his name out of the paper? I would say no. Mm-hmm. I can't keep my own son's name out of the paper. I'm not going to keep yours out. You know? And that went a long way with the community too, because they said, sure. Oh, okay. And you have to be flexible, I think, also in that maybe this candidate isn't the best, but under the circumstances, this is the candidate we want versus Superman over here. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know.
Anything on effective leadership? I mean, the fairness, but also what has worked for you leading a force? What?
I think my wife. You know,
behind every good man.
Well, that's true, but every time some officer or some employee had a baby, my wife would, all on her own, make a meal and take them a baby gift.
Hmm.
I mean, that's why we're not rich, you know. But no, I'm just kidding. But she was a part. She was like mom,
Hmm.
kind of, to the department, and they remember that. I mean,
Well,
so
that's so important to have a personal connection.
yeah, and um, yeah,
Mhm.
you have to be personal with 93 employees. You have to remember their names and their kids' names, and I'm really bad at that, but she's not, so
Mhm.
that helped.
Mhm.
Um,
Do you think the issues that the police force faces today, internally or externally, are different than what they were when you were there?
yeah, I think well, in some respects, it's always changing.
Mhm.
It's always evolving, but um, I think there's different. Uh, all of the nationally publicized incidents in the last 5 years probably makes it tough for police departments.
You're talking about this police brutality, like the
Yeah,
Black Lives Matter kind of stuff.
and all of that. And in fact, after one of those incidents, there was going to be I guess, a big rally downtown in the park, for Black Lives Matter or something like that. And this was after I left. And the chief handled it really well. Um, he met with the people beforehand and said, "Hey, we don't mind you doing this. You have to be nice about it, but you know." And it was a dud for the demonstrators. I mean, it just didn't materialize like they wanted it to. And I thought that was a good move. I really
Mhm.
did.
Mhm.
Um, and you just have to be upfront with people like that.
I'm curious also just because of where we're at in the country right now, and
Yeah.
if you feel that the police are being called upon to do sort of the job of policing immigrants,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
documenting undocumented
Right.
residents.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a bad move when local police do the federal the federal police's job,
Yeah. Mhm.
when Kansas took the right, or the privilege, I guess, more appropriate, of driving away from undocumented visitors, that kind of sent a message, um, and it complicated things for us because people are still driving, and us, I mean police. Um, People still have to drive, and they still have to get to work. But if you can't drive with a license, you can't get insurance, and it complicates everything. And once you have an accident, um, then it's a mess for everybody. And I even lobbied to the state Senate and the state House of Representatives about that. And I said, give them back their licenses. Let them have a license. So one, we can identify who they probably are, and they can drive legally. They can get insurance, and that makes things a lot easier
Safer.
for everybody.
Mhm.
They have to pass a test to get a
Right.
license. Plus, they have to have insurance to get that. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so there was that political part of the job too that I didn't think about it. Besides the city commission, is you have to lobby sometimes the state, and there are political bodies like the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police and things like that. But I don't always see eye to eye with them either. I mean, I'm a little more pragmatic, I think,
Mm-hmm.
than that sometimes.
You mentioned also the state attorney general making a change that you didn't agree
Well,
with, which was what?
back in the day, and I think he was, he might have been the attorney general back then. No, he was something else.
What was his name?
Kobach,
Kobach.
Chris Kobach. Um, we had a kind of a Zoom conference. He was on a panel, and I was on another panel, and anyway, we were talking about driver's licenses and immigrants, and how he wanted Kansas local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration laws. And I said, absolutely not. I said, that destroys any trust that we can garner from local immigrants. They're not going to want to talk to us about anything if they think that when we're done, we're going to arrest them for being an illegal
Mm-hmm.
person in the United States. That's just wrong. And he didn't see it that way, but he thought that we should, if local law enforcement suspects you of being an undocumented visitor, you should be able to stop them. Well, at the time, we had a representative who was previously a city commissioner here who happened to be Hispanic. And I said, well, we'll be stopping Dennis every week, because he could be an undocumented visitor.
Mm-hmm.
He's Hispanic. I mean, that is prejudice at its finest right there.
Right.
So, those sort of
Has
things.
that change been instituted?
No.
Okay.
It never took wings, but there was, but there's still that attempt. There seems to be this national wave of anti-immigrant, and I think it's wrong, because who's going to do the construction work? Who's going to do the service work at hotels?
The packing plants.
The packing plants. And that was one of the points that I said to him. I said, when we hire a new officer, we make them take a tour of which is what's now Tyson. And I don't know if they still do that or not, but I said, not one of them came back and said, Chief, I'd like to resign and go work at the beef packing plant. They went, holy cow,
Those are hard jobs.
They're a hard job. And when before, and the reason I instituted that was because when I was undercover, I took a tour out there. And I came back and I said to my wife, I said, no wonder they do drugs and get drunk and fight and go crazy on the weekends. I said, if I had to do that 10 hours a day, every day, I would go nuts. It's an ugly job. So that was the other thing when I became chief, is I said, we need to give our new guys a tour of things in the community that they will be dealing with, and hopefully they'll get an understanding of why people do what they do.
And what experiences they're living every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your view, there's been a lot of change in Garden City,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen? And also whether you think Garden City has benefited from all the immigrants who have.
I think it has. When I moved to Garden City, and I thought I had gone back in time like 10 years, for a number of reasons. For one, um, it was a dry county where you couldn't buy liquor by the drink unless you were a club member. We had clubs. You couldn't just go into a bar and have a drink and then go home. Um, and I had been used to that for a long time.
Whole life.
My whole life, you know. So when I moved here and I went, what? They said, no, you can't, you can't buy, you can go to the liquor store, but you can't go into a bar. And I went, really? So, but I think it has changed in some respects. Of course, we went from under 20,000 to over 30,000 and since I've been here, but and we do draw in a lot of people from surrounding communities because of our commercial opportunities. But I think some of the old timers are still grumbling about that, because it does bring in people
that are different from them.
that are different. But it's good for the economy. I mean, it's got to be. And does it create challenges? Yeah, because on the weekends, our population probably goes to 50,000 people because they come in to shop. But it has that part I like, the fact that it's growing, and it's brought in different people. And you see people walking around with colorful dresses and things like that you just go, wow.
You celebrate the diversity.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I
that's
do.
wonderful. Have you ever thought of living anywhere else?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, my wife is still a baby and she's employed and she's still working. So, and she has a great job, and we just have to, I have to, live long enough to enjoy her retirement too. But we just don't know where that would be, and we're comfortable. I mean, and if we need to get away, we do.
You can travel.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about raising your children here and what that was like?
Yeah, it's funny. Our youngest is the language genius. He speaks. He went to school in Sweden, and he learned Swedish. He passed a national proficiency exam in 11 months, I think, of being in Sweden. So he speaks Swedish, German, Czech, Arabic, and
Wow.
but when he was in school, I was trying to teach him Spanish, and he was doing great until he got to first grade, and he said, I don't want to learn any more Spanish. And I went, okay, well, now he says, I wish you'd have taught me Spanish. And but he went to Peru and he learned Spanish there. He took an intensive 4-week course in Spanish. So.
And do you think growing up here gave him that sort of appreciation for different cultures and
I
interest?
Think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think I would tell him stories of travels, and
Yeah.
I think probably got him where he is today. But um, the the other three kids, they're all different, but they all appreciate the diversity in some way or another.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they all were very successful in school too. I mean, some academically and athletically, and some just academically. But
Mhm.
um, they
So it was a
were.
good place to raise your kids.
It was, I think.
Do you have any fears about Garden City's future?
Well, uh, I wish that they would. I wish Garden City would recruit um, a more academic population, maybe. I think that's what it lacks more than anything is they're good at agricultural stuff, and of course they'll say, well, we need to stick with what we know, but if you do that, you're stuck, I think.
Mhm.
I would like to see maybe a 4-year university or um, 4-year college or something like that, something that attracts a more academic
Mhm.
personality to the community, because we're great at recruiting hardworking
Right.
people, you know.
But that's a different kind of diversity.
Yeah,
Right?
it really is.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about your 4 years with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, which is where you went
Um,
afterwards?
I was overworked. um, I,
There or
yeah,
as chief?
no, in the bureau. I loved the bureau. It was, and what I liked about it was the investigation part.
So it
I,
was different than what you did as
It
chief of police.
it was totally different. I mean, I wasn't in charge of anything. I traveled all over the western half of the state investigating everything from political corruption to homicide. And I wasn't in charge. I was just, the phone would ring and they'd say, go to Colby or go to Syracuse or go to Atwood or wherever and investigate this or that. It was a blast. For one, I wasn't in charge, and two, it gave me the opportunity to talk to people and investigate and for some reason my I got the cases where it was if a sheriff was dipping into the county tills or things like that, um, or unfortunately, I had a sheriff who got arrested for domestic violence and that sort of thing. Uh, those were my assignments, but it was great. But I kind of waited too late to do that sort of thing. By after 4 years, I was tired,
Mm-hmm.
and I was 69 years old, and I said, "Yeah, maybe it's time to quit." And so,
Have some downtime
yeah,
left, right?
yeah.
Now you
But
were
it was a fun job, and it's quite a family of agents. It really is.
what were people's views of Garden City who didn't live here?
Um, that there was a lot of crime,
Hmm.
I think.
Do you think there
But
was more than in other places in Kansas?
no. But in the 90s, there was. We had a lot of crime in the 90s. In the late 90s was when, after I became chief, and just before, there was a lot of gang stuff going on, and we were getting grants right and left to combat crime and and develop special units for community policing endeavors and things like that. So we had one of the highest crime rates in Kansas per capita in the late 90s, and that kind of mellowed out after.
So one, what do you think contributed to that? And two, what contributed to its demise? Was it drug related?
It was drugs. I think if you have gangs, you have drugs and you have violence. And there was a lot. There was a horrific gang killing. And
Here in the city.
yeah.
What was that?
It started at a party here in town, and they ended up beating this kid and running over him with a car. It was brutal.
Was this high school age or?
Yeah, it was late teens, early 20s type stuff. But per capita in the late 90s, we were right up there, but we took a no nonsense approach to it and kind of knocked it out, or at least knocked it down to a manageable level.
Mm-hmm. How did you do that?
Well, we had a gang unit that just worked on, identified every gangster in town, and monitored their behavior, and we had a county attorney who, if it was gang related, would prosecute it very strictly, and that helped a bunch.
What do you think appealed to people who joined gangs?
Membership, family, kind of belonging sort of thing. It's a strange phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
But
was it larger, the reach of it, than just in Garden City? Were they connected to?
Oh yeah, they were connected to Dodge and Liberal and sometimes farther out.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is people who don't have a real strong family at home, or mom and dad are working 24 hours a day and there's no monitoring.
Right.
And so they get bored, I think.
Right.
Did
you work a lot with youth or find certain?
We did have officers who did that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what they did.
Interesting. I guess another question that I have in the big picture is, before that, did you have anything to do when you were at the KBI with sort of foiling the domestic terrorist plot here in 2016?
No, in fact, we weren't even remotely involved in it. It was strictly the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Okay. Were you surprised?
Yes and no. I mean, I was very happy that they foiled the process. I guess in hindsight, it probably didn't surprise me that there was that sentiment out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of underlying prejudice that sometimes rears its ugly head.
Any thoughts on the best way to combat it?
No, I mean, you have to change people's personalities or their entire genealogical makeup, I think.
Well, I think one thing you've been talking about is that being exposed and making connections to people who are very different from you
Sure.
opens you to them. And
Some people, but I mean,
yeah,
uh, I'm sure that people drive around Garden City and don't see the same thing I see.
yeah.
I mean, they go, "Oh no,
Hmm.
those people."
So
And
there's still some of that.
oh yeah,
Hmm.
it's it's a very conservative place. That I think that was one of the cultural shocks that I experienced when I first moved here was that um, people were very and I'm not a rake and a rogue, but I mean, I, I I was just shocked at how conservative people are and still are. I mean, I think Kansas voted for LBJ back in '64, but that's
That was the last.
that was the last Democrat that Kansas
Wow.
elected, except governors. I mean, every once in a while they'll elect a governor that's Democrat, but
Hmm.
and they all hate her or
Uh-huh.
him or whatever. But I think there've been two, and they were both women, and everybody hated them. And I thought, why? You know, it's just, but it's a very conservative place, and they fear change.
Hmm.
Um, so, and I like change. I think change is great. You know.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Has being a policeman or a chief of police impacted your views on human nature for the better or
Somewhat.
worse?
Yeah. I am. Um, we have discussions at our house every once in a while, but I am uh, suspicious of everyone. You know. I mean, and it takes a while. And um, I might get to like you later, but I don't like you immediately. I'm that kind of guy. Um, the other half likes you right away, but then goes, "Oh, maybe you weren't so nice after
Uh-huh.
all." You know,
So you're cautious.
I am very cautious.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably a good quality for an
Um,
officer.
and maybe I've always been that way, but I don't know. I mean, but I think being an officer probably maybe exposed that in me a little better or a little more, you know.
Well, you see the underbelly and you see the.
Well, you see what people are capable of, and you go, "Wow, where'd that come from?" You
Mhm.
know. Um, so trust is not in my nature, but
Are there things that give you hope? What are your hopes?
oh, I every once in a while I'll see something that goes, "Oh, that's awesome," you know, you know. But um, yeah, something happened just the other day that kind of made me smile, but now I can't remember what it was. But it was just something really out of the ordinary where somebody did something extraordinarily nice, and I went, "Huh."
Here's to more kindness in the
Yeah, that's
world.
right.
Right.
You know.
Is there anything I haven't asked you? I think you've done a fantastic job of sort of.
Oh no, I think you're pretty thorough.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's been a great pleasure to
oh,
hear about
same
your
here.
life as
Oh well,
in law enforcement and
pretty uneventful. I in the big scheme of things, I think. But
sounds like you had a pretty awesome influence on the force here.
well, I hope so, but we'll see.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for your interview.
Thank you.